So let's take a look at our topics today. So although we're going to talk a lot about the templates, I would like to take the chance to add a little bit of information of automation that is possible even without templates in memoQ. There are some areas in memoQ and memoQ Server where things can be automated, or at least tasks can be combined. And one of them would be, for example, the cascading filters. So adding several filters to one file. I'll have an example on one of the next slides for you. So my example would be I have an XML file or an Excel file which contains something other than XML or Excel text, namely HTML codes, and also some other placeholders which I want to convert into tags. Or when you run the pre-translation, I know that a lot of people use the pre-translation, but sometimes people miss all the other steps that are in the pre-translation dialog. So there is a way to lock segments, to create a snapshot, to do the statistics after the pre-translation, all within one dialog. So that is something that might be interesting. When you update translation memories in an online project with 25 target languages and you update all the translation memories at the same time, that's a combination of tasks. That's a sort of automation as well. Or when we talk about the server, there's also, since the latest version, a way to archive server projects automatically at a certain time or when certain things have happened. Now let me give you a little bit more details on the topics that I have here. So for example, this is an example for cascading filters. You all might have seen files like that, which are not very nice for the translator. So what we can do is we can combine filters. Here I've combined a filter for Excel files with an HTML filter, which will mark up everything between the angle brackets as a tag. And then there are some other, let me go back. There are some things like within the dollar symbols or the hash symbols. So these are placeholders that I also want to make into tags, and that would be the regex tagger that I'm adding to these two other filters. And in the end, I have something that looks a little bit nicer for the translator to work with. So everything that's HTML gets caught by the HTML filter. Everything that is a placeholder, which I've specified with regular expressions, gets marked as a tag. And all in all, the file is still an Excel file. When I export it, it will still be an Excel file. So the whole thing about the pre-translation and all the settings that we have there, if you go into the pre-translation in memoQ and you decide you want to pre-translate all good matches, so meaning with a default setting from 95% to 101, and automatically join in split segments. So that's the default setting for a pre-translation. But if you go into the next tab, you could also say that, well, every exact match and better, so the 100%, 101%, 102%, if you're working with that, they get the status of reviewer 2 confirmed, and they get locked right away. And then I could still go on one step to versioning and say, well, I might want to keep the state of the translation document as it was after my pre-translation, because there might be a time when I find that something has happened to the file that was not okay, and I need to roll back. I need to have a point to go back to. That would be a snapshot. And with the pre-translation, you can create automatically such a snapshot. And in the end, that allows you to compare versions against each other, the version after pre-translation against the version after the translation done by the translator, or to roll back to that point in time and then do something else with the file. And then in the end, creating statistics, so running the analysis, and then do that and use all the translation memories and corpora from the project, use homogeneity to get the match values of similar sentences within the documents, and maybe also include spaces in your character count, whatever you like to do. So a lot of things that you can combine if you run a pre-translation. The next one that I mentioned was when you have a project that has lots of target languages. You're working with working translation memories during translation. And in the end, the master translation memories all get updated at the same time with the segment pairs from the documents. Here you can see the result, the summary of all the different languages that have been updated with the different sentences from the documents in my project. And the last one I mentioned was the archiving of server projects. So a server project is then bundled up into a zip file, and so that you can put it away and archive it if you need to. There would be two options. You could archive every project that has been wrapped up if you're using the wrap up feature. Or you could say, well, all the projects where all the documents have been delivered in all the roles assigned to the people, and the last modification date is 10 days ago, so nobody has touched the project for the last 10 days, that is going to be archived automatically. And this archival, that happens every 5 days. And if the archiving runs for more than 2 hours, because during the archiving process, the server is not available for other people to work with. So if it runs longer than 2 hours, it will stop so that people can get back to working with the server. So these would be the tasks, the automations that are there with even without the templates. Now let's take a look closer into the templates. And I did a small test. So I set up an online project, and I just counted how often I had to click to set it up with 2 target languages, to have a translation memory in there, to have a term base, to adding the users, or assigning the users, and then run some statistics on the project. Really simple tasks, not much settings. And it took me about 50 clicks. Depending on how many languages you have, how many users you want to assign, it might be a lot more. Now then I set up a template, and I created the project with the template, and it took me down to a little over 10 clicks to do basically what I had done before, doing it manually. So I have a project template, and we'll take a look inside in just a moment, where I use predefined people. The people are assigned automatically because of the language pair that is assigned to them. They are assigned to the languages or to the documents in the project. And these statistics are created automatically by target language. So as you can see, using the templates and using them right can bring down the number of clicks that a project manager has to do quite a lot. So let's take a look at the setup options of such a template. So let me quickly go to the resource console, to the templates, and let's take a look what you can do in a template. First of all, a template is a really good way to have consistent naming of your projects, for example, because there are placeholders that you can use. I used placeholders, so my project name, if somebody uses this template to create a project afterwards, the project name is going to consist out of what is in the project field, which somebody will fill that out with a project number or something like that. There will be the name of the client. I've predefined that here because this template is only used for client A. And afterwards, I will have the 4 digits of the year and the 2 digits of the month. So here are the placeholders that you can use, from source language in ISO 2 or ISO 3 codes, to target languages, to a list of all the target languages that you have in your project. Then I've selected the languages. So source language is set, and my target languages are set as well. Here's French, there's German, and so on, which helps really quite a lot if you're dealing with projects that have lots and lots of target languages every time. Now, the template doesn't force you to use these languages. When you create a new project with these languages or with this template, you are free to change the source language and also the target languages. So you can add more languages, you can take some off. It's up to you. It's basically, the template is just the list of things that you might want to use, but whatever you use afterwards, that's up to you. The whole setup of the online project, that's what you usually have when you create an online project with the project wizard. So all the settings you have there, from switching on track changes for a certain role, for using either packages or workflow phases, from allowing a translator to, or a user to deliver a document that has errors or not. Short difference between errors and warnings. The warnings are the flash symbols that you can see in the memoQ editor. The errors are the one that have this red exclamation mark. And in the QA check, you can set what error constitutes, or what mistake constitutes an error and what a warning. If you're translating confidential material, you might not want your users to connect to machine translation systems. So for projects based on this template, you could say whenever a project is based on this template, a user will not be able to use machine translation directly in memoQ. Other settings of whether the users can split or join segments, or they are allowed to download an offline copy, using the skeleton to create the target language file. Again, for confidentiality reasons, you might not want them to be able to do that, so you can take that off. And then you have all the communication, where you say whatever workflow you're using, whatever your assignment you're using in the project, you can then say at what time does somebody get an email. So when the project is started, when it's distributed, then everybody gets an email. When a document is added to the project and assigned to a user, that user gets an email. When the document is taken off or maybe given to somebody else, the user who had it before gets an email and the new user gets an email. So all the email notifications can be set up here. The next step, the live docs, I'll show you when I've created a project with that. Actually, I'm not using the live docs for alignments, but for additional information. I'm adding style guides and PDF files for viewing, so that the translators can see what they're translating if the files don't have a preview, for example. You could also add other documents used for concordance searching. You can add pictures, videos, whatever you like as an additional information. The live docs are good for that as well. So it's not only the alignments. The translation memories. So here I am defining that master translation memories are added to a project based on this template if they have that set up. So if they start with the name master, underscore client name for client A, underscore source language and target language. So you can see here, down here, I have a lot of translation memories for the different languages. I could choose them manually, but I don't have to. If they're all set up in that pattern that I'm defining here, then memoQ will select the right translation memory from the list of TMs. For the working translation memory, I'm going to create working translation memories for my translators. So while they work, they'll be saving into the working translation memory. And you'll later see with the automation that I've set up, I'm going to delete the working translation memories after project wrap up because I don't need them anymore. I'm going to update my master translation memories, and these are the ones that count in the end. So the working translation memories will be created. The master translation memories will be selected from the list of available translation memories if that pattern comes up. If for a target language this translation memory doesn't exist with that kind of pattern, then memoQ is going to create one. For the term bases, I'm only specifying that whenever there is a term base, where in the setup information of the term base, the client name comes up that I've specified in my template here. So if client A comes up anywhere in the definition of the term base, then that term base is going to be attached to my project. The muses are actually local resources. You cannot attach them to an online project. And let's go on to the settings. I have defined that for some languages, if they act as source languages, I have separate segmentation rules. So I have changed the default rules. So if English or German is a source language, then I'm using the respective segmentation rules. For the other languages, if they are source language at any time, then I'm using, at the moment, the default rules. What I can do for the source languages with the segmentation rules, I can do for the target languages with the QA check. So here you can see that for the target languages that have been specified in the template, I'm using a specific QA check for every target language. So I'm going to just select which one I want to use. In the auto translation rules, I have some conversions set up. So for example, the conversion of degree centigrade to degree Fahrenheit so that memoQ can calculate the values, or depending on what languages you're using, you might want to change a sequence of a number plus a percentage symbol into a percentage symbol plus the number, so turning the sequence around. I was told that in Turkish, that's how people do it mostly. Anything else that needs to be converted and where the translator needs to be made aware that these conversions need to happen, and you also want to check them with the QA checker later, that you can set up in the auto translation rules. You might also want to add an ignore list, so terms that should not be seen as a mistake by the spell checker. And here we have the area for all the other settings in memoQ. So the translation memory settings, at what stage or at what match rate matches will appear, either during interactive translation or during pre-translation. LiveDoc settings, if you have alignments, with what penalties they come up with matches. LQA settings, so if you want to categorize mistakes, like you have strong or heavy terminology problems, or you have bad terminology errors and you have light terminology errors and something like that, you might want to categorize these things. But that's a whole session on itself. Font substitutions, if the font needs to change between source and target languages. The rules for exporting the files. I've added a non-translatable list, so I have a list of names that should not be translated, and also the QA check is going to check that in the term check. And I have also added some filters. So whenever I use this template to create a project and I import Excel files, because from this client I always get the same kind of Excel files, I'm going to use this cascading filter for Excel files containing HTML and some placeholders that are going to be tagged, as we've seen in the presentation. And for the XML files, I have a specific filter for the XML files from this client. So let's go on to the people. I've already added all the people who I might want to use in this project. And I have set up their roles. So I've defined that translator number 1 is translator for German, and reviewer DE is the reviewer number 1 for German. So you can already put in all the people that you want to use in the project. And if the languages have been associated with the user, then you can do an automatic assignment. So if I know I have German as a target language, then memoQ will assign trans1 to the documents for translation into German, and reviewer DE as the reviewer number 1 for these documents. And all that is done in the automation actions. And here I have some points in the document where I have added some automation. So for example, after documents are imported into the project, I want to do the auto assignment. So if I have a translator whose language pair is English to German, my project is set up English to German, this translator is going to be assigned to the documents for translation into German. I'm also creating an analysis report, and here you get the regular setup for choosing what kind of analysis you want. If you want to use homogeneity or not, if you want to include character spaces into the character counts, if you want to use the tag weight. So basically saying my translator has to deal with a lot of tags. I want to be able to pay him for the time he's using to do those tags. So maybe I assign a tag weight of half a word. So every every tag weighs as much as half a word. 2 tags together give 1 more word. So for 2 tags, I'm going to pay him 1 more word, things like that. Also, I've decided to export the analysis results right away onto the server, and I'm going to create a separate file for each target language. There is also a way to set up the name of these documents, so it will contain the project name, the client name, it will contain the year, the month, the day, and the language ID of the target language, so that I know which analysis result belongs to what language. So that's at the project start, really. Now, as soon as my translator delivers the documents, I'm going to run a QA check to see what's in there. And I'm going to send the report in an email to the translator and also to the reviewer. And I'm going to export that QA check also onto my server machine. I've given it a certain name, and it's going to have the name of the translator associated with this document. Now then, the reviewer number 1 gets going with the files, and after the reviewer has delivered, I'm going to export the files into a 2-column RTF because my reviewer number 2 is not working with memoQ. He's not working with any tool. He wants to work in Word, so I'm going to export that file right away. Again, export on server, so it will be available for me as soon as reviewer number 1 delivers the document back. I will have the 2-column RTF file that I can send off to my reviewer number 2. And at the very end, when everything has finished in the project, I'm going to wrap up the project. And wrap up then means, for me, I'm going to delete the working translation memories because I don't need them anymore. I'm going to update the master translation memories, confirm and update rows. I'll export memoQ files because I need them for archiving. I'll export the target language documents, and I'll also export a copy of the source language documents so that I have everything together. Now let's see how that works when I want to create a project with that. New online project from template. I'm going to add my documents. And in the next step, I can select then my template, automation in memoQ. Client A is already in there because that's by default in the template. It also tells me that I need to fill out the project field because that's needed to create the name. So it's the project number 678. The languages have been set. You can change them if you want, source language and target languages. So you're not fixed with what you set up in the template. And now it's going to create the working translation memories. It's going to link the translation memories, the master translation memories, the term bases. It has already auto-assigned the documents, so you can see for the different languages that I have, it has assigned the translator that was set up with the respective language pair, and also the reviewer, if there is a reviewer. Let's take a look at the Files tab. It did create the analysis reports right away. So we have HTML files that we can open or download from here. The overall statistic is in the reports. So the statistics for the whole project is also in the reports, just as usual. So it's the same as if I had done it manually. What you can also see is that when you use a template for creating a project, you will not have all the settings that you're used to, because this project is now on autopilot. So supposedly everything that needs to be set up has been set up in the template, and I don't need to do anything else here. But if I do, or if I need to check something, if I need to add a new translation memory or something like that, I can always turn off the autopilot. The only thing you need to be very aware of, there's also a checkbox where it says turn off automated action as well. If you have automated actions in your project, I would recommend not to turn them off because you cannot turn them on again. And if you turn them off, you will have to do everything manually, like deleting translation memories, assigning people, creating export files and things like that. So be careful not to turn the automation off as well. Once I turn off my autopilot, you can see I have all the other settings that I want to maybe take a look at. Let's see, I have the translation memories. So my master translation memories have been chosen. The working translation memories have been created by the template. Let's take a look. There might also be other translation memories. So if I switch to the certain language, I can then see if there's any other translation memory that I might want to add. Let's see, I think there was another one for Japanese. Yeah, I might want to add that as well. And then, of course, I could run the statistics again if I like. For the term bases, also, 2 term bases have been selected because in the setup of the term base, it says they are associated with client A. And again, I could choose another one or deselect one of those that have been selected. It's up to you. A quick look at the live docs. Here I have set up a corpus. As I said, I have not used it for alignments. I have used it for additional information, so reference material, so to speak. And if I do a double click, for example, on that file, it's a PDF file that's going to open up in a PDF viewer. So it's not a file that's being handled inside memoQ, but it is some kind of information that my translator might need, and they can go inside and look at it. So now the only thing that I still need to do is I can launch the project, and then people can get working with the files. In the end, when the project is done, I can wrap it up. And then all the files are going to be exported to my server. The working translation memories are going to be deleted. So let's take a look inside again. Take a look at the list of the files. And here you can see my MQXLib files have been created for archiving, and the imported source documents together with the target documents. And it probably needs a little bit. I can't create the RTF files because the translator has not delivered in between. But if I had run through the project in a regular way, once the translator delivered, I would also see the RTF files here. And let's take a look at the list of translation memories. As you can see, for example, for French, I do have a master translation memory, but the working translation memory doesn't appear any longer. So this has been deleted by the wrap-up. So that's, in a nutshell, what the templates can do. Now, there is one more area of the templates that might also be quite useful, which I would like to show you very quickly, just as a slide. Because sometimes it happens that you don't only have to prepare files inside of memoQ, like locking things, pre-translating things, joining and splitting segments, but there also needs to be some preparation outside of memoQ. And usually you have to do that before you even import the file into memoQ. Now, memoQ allows you in the templates to also use scripts. So to run something on the file before it even gets imported into memoQ. For example, very often I hear that the client has prepared a file and says, well, everything that's highlighted in yellow needs to be translated, everything else not. Now, there is no setting in memoQ to tell memoQ, okay, only take the yellow highlighted text. But with a script, before the import, and there's a sample script that says run office macro. Basically, you only need a macro in Word that can be called to run. And that would then, if you have a text where something is marked in yellow, then you could have a macro that puts everything else that's not yellow to hidden. The default import in for a Word file, for example, says that hidden text doesn't get imported. And then it would look something like this. So everything that's outside of that highlighted area gets put into tags. The other area, again, this is a sample script that you can download. Oh yeah, you could run another script after translation to open the file in the background in Word again and to undo the hidden text so that you have the real file again. And then another of the sample scripts from Kilgrey is something for XML files. Imagine you have to translate an XML file and the client says, well, in the end, I want to have a multilingual XML file. I don't want to have an XML file for each and every target language. So what you can do is, if the file looks something like this, the script could run on this file before it imports into memoQ, and it would give memoQ a file that already has the areas where the target languages need to go after translation. The only thing you need to have in your template would then also be an XML filter for multilingual XML files. And that is something I can show you right now. So I'm going to create a project with a template, going to add an XML file. Let's see. So this is how the XML file looks like, just like in my slide. Now I need the template for automating the script. I have a filter for multilingual XML file in the background of this template. It only needs a name for the project. And it's going to run the script on the XML file and then import the file into the memoQ project and then open up the project for me. So there we go. Now the XML file has been imported for the different target languages. When I export that again, it will be pushed back into one file that then contains all the different languages in one file. All right, so we're almost through with time. Maybe we have some questions that we can go into right now. Peter, do we have anything interesting that we need to discuss at this point?
I've firstly been asked to tell you, and I put the URL into the chat window, that you can download sample files at memoQ.com downloads. There were a couple of questions that were raised, and I think I've answered them, but maybe you could just further talk on them. One question that was asked was, what is the advantage of archiving projects on the memoQ server?
Well, the thing is, archiving projects would mean that they do not appear anymore in the list of projects, and they also don't appear in the list of the recycle bin. Because yes, you can move them to the recycle bin, so they're not in the list of the active projects, but when you open up the recycle bin, then you would have like hundreds of projects, and you do get quite a lot of projects once you get started with the memoQ server. So it's just a way to put them away, to not delete them fully, but still have them if you need them. And you could use them, for example, if 2 years ago you've created a project for a client with a big manual, now they come back and they have updated their manual, they would like to reuse everything that you did before one-on-one, so they don't want to pay for that again. So you would get the files from the previous project, use them as the basis, and do an X-translate with the new files on top of them. You could also use the archived XML files for that, but you could also archive the whole project. It also has to do with saving space on your server machine. Anything else?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
We currently are in a situation where we have to redact content from files, removing personal information before it goes into translation memory, and then add it back after translation in order to be in compliance with HIPAA regulations. And I'm trying to figure out if there's a way between either running a script on Word before the document goes in, or somehow causing if memoQ can recognize personal information somehow, names and dates, and preventing that from being saved to TM. Is there any possible way that you can think of that would be possible?
Well, I can think of two different ways. So as you mentioned, it could be a script that goes in and basically changes the names to some kind of placeholder. And in the end, a script to put names back to the placeholders. Or what you could do, maybe you could run a tagger and tell memoQ not to use the text for the name of the tag. So let me just quickly see if I have an example for that. Let's see if that works. Because what you can do, if you tag something, it says here, for example, emphasis, it comes from an XML file, but if you do the tags yourself, you can say either use the text and make a tag that has this text, or change the name of the tag to something that I specify. So for example, if I do a tagger and I say, well, everything that has a number, a dash, a number, and a letter, I'll say a number, dash, a number, and a letter. And that doesn't get the display text as it is here, but it says XXX. Okay. So then the thing comes up as a tag. It comes up with X's. In the background, it's still the text that was there, but nobody can see it. Nobody can get inside and see it. So that would be the second way that I could see that you might want to hide things from a file.
We have another hand raised from Veronica.
I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on.
No
I didn't turn it on.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
We've a number of questions that came in. One asked, is there somewhere where archiving and versioning has to be turned on somewhere in the memoQ server settings?
Archiving, yes, the archiving needs to be turned on in the memoQ server itself. So there is the archiving. That's where you need to turn it on so that you can use it. And the versioning, that is something that you turn on per project. So that is something when you create a new project, then there is this checkbox where you can say either a local project or a server project. There's this checkbox where it says record version history, which is by default checked, and I would leave it on if you want to use it. If you switch it off, you can switch it back on. Sorry if I'm jumping into that. So if you, like if we have a project and it had been switched off, there's a way to switch it back on. There is this record document version history. So the versioning, but that would then, if you turn it back on, that would only work for the documents that are imported after this, after you've set this checkbox. Okay.
Okay. There's another question being asked whether templates are available in memoQ 2014 release 2.
2014. I would have to look that up. I don't know that by heart. I think they came with 2015.
And they are available. However, there have
they are available in 2014.
Yeah,
okay.
There's one difference. There have been some additions, particularly with the automated actions and the ability to run scripts that were not introduced until 2015.
Right, the scripting that came after, that wasn't in the first version that had the templates. And you're right, the automated action, especially for the server, they have been extended over time.
Okay, I think this is all the questions that I have. I think we've also come to the end of the time that we allocated for this webinar. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending and also thank Angelica for an excellent webinar. Thank you very much.
Well, thank all of you also for your questions, and I hope we've answered some of them. Have a nice evening, or wherever you are, a nice day, and maybe talk to you, see you, write you at one of the next webinars.
Just one thing before you go. We will shortly be sending you an email where we will give you a URL so that you can download the recording of this webinar. We also have just published an ebook on project templates, which will give you further hints and useful advice on how to use them. And we will include the questions that have been asked and the answers we've given. So again, thank you very much, and we'll be sending you that quite soon.
Okay, thank you again from my side, and bye-bye.